The stars were quiet that night. They were always quiet, but Park had learned to listen anyway. She sat alone in the communications room of the research vessel, which meant sky in her mother's language. The ship floated through deep space, far from Earth, far from anything humans had ever explored before. 12 crew members lived on this ship, and most of them were sleeping now. Only remained awake, watching screens filled with numbers and waves that meant nothing to most people but meant everything to her. Was 29 years old. She had black hair that she kept short because long hair was trouble in space. Her eyes were tired but sharp, trained to notice small things that others would miss. She had wanted to explore the stars since she was a little girl watching the night sky from her grandmother's roof. Now she was here, millions of kilometers from home, and sometimes she wondered if the universe was as empty as it seemed. Her job was simple but important. She listened to space. She caught signals, sorted through noise, and searched for anything unusual. Most nights she found nothing. Space was full of sounds, but they were natural sounds. Stars dying, planets spinning, radiation echoing from events that happened millions of years ago. None of it was alive. None of it was trying to speak. But tonight was different. It started as a small flicker on her screen, a tiny spike in the data that most people would ignore. Almost ignored it too. She was tired. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her shift would end soon and her bed was calling her name. But something made her stop. Something made her look closer. She touched the screen and pulled the data toward her. The spike was buried deep in background radiation, hidden like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Any normal filter would delete it automatically. Any normal person would never know it existed. Was not normal. She had spent years learning to find things that did not want to be found. She isolated the signal and began cleaning it. Layer by layer, she removed the noise around it. Static fell away. Interference faded. And slowly, like a shape emerging from fog, something became clear. It was a pattern, not random, not natural. Someone had made this. His heart began to beat faster. She had found alien signals before, but they were always old, dead, echoes from civilizations that had disappeared long ago. This felt different. This felt alive. She ran the signal through the translation software. The computer worked for several minutes, comparing the patterns to every known language in the Federation database. Most alien languages took weeks to decode, sometimes months. But this signal was simple, too simple, like someone had made it easy on purpose. Like someone wanted to be understood. The translation appeared on her screen, and felt her blood turn cold. "Save me, please, anyone, save me." The words repeated, again and again, a loop that never ended, and beneath the words woven into the signal itself was something else, a rhythm, a pulse, almost like a heartbeat. Almost like breathing. Played the audio version. The voice that came through the speakers was high and soft, young. It trembled with fear and exhaustion and something worse than both, hope that was almost gone. It was a child, was sure of it. Somewhere out there in the endless dark of space, a child was crying for help. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she traced the signal to its source. It came from an uncharted system, 3 days away from their current path. The planet was dying. Radiation levels were increasing. Seismic activity was tearing it apart. In a few weeks, maybe less, there would be nothing left. When morning came, went to Captain. Captain was 52 years old, a man made of rules and discipline. He had served in the Federation Navy for 30 years before taking command of the. He was not cruel, but he was not soft either. He believed in following orders, completing missions, and bringing his crew home safely. He had no room in his heart for risks that did not make sense. Showed him the signal. She played the voice. She explained everything she had found. Captain listened without expression. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "It is probably an echo," he said finally. "An old distress beacon left behind by a dead civilization. The Vila region is full of them." Sir, the signal has biological markers, argued. The heartbeat pattern, the breathing. This is not a machine. You do not know that, Captain shook his head. Our mission is to survey the Vela pulsar. We have schedules, responsibilities. I cannot take this ship 3 days off course for a ghost. And if it is not a ghost, his voice rose before she could stop it. If there is a child out there alone waiting for someone to come, we just ignore her. We log the signal. We report it to Federation Command. They will send someone. That could take weeks, months. You saw the data. That planet is dying now. Captain's eyes hardened. Lieutenant Park, I understand your feelings, but I cannot risk this crew for a possibility. My answer is no. He walked away and stood alone in the corridor, the child's voice still echoing in her mind. That night she could not eat, she could not rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same words, "Save me, please, anyone." She went to the medical bay and found Lee, the ship's doctor, was 33, a gentle man with kind eyes and steady hands. He and had been friends since their academy days. She trusted him more than anyone else on this ship. She played the signal for him without explanation. She watched his face as he listened. His expression changed slowly. His smile faded. His eyes grew serious. When the recording ended, he looked at with something like pain. "That is not a machine," he said quietly. "That is a child begging." "I know," his voice cracked, "but the captain will not help. He says it is not our mission." Was silent for a long time. He stared at the wall, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "There is a saying my mother used to tell me. She said that when you hear someone crying for help, you have two choices. You can pretend you did not hear, or you can answer. But once you hear, you cannot. The sound stays with you forever." He looked at, "I heard it now, I cannot it." "What do we do?" Stood up slowly. "We find others who cannot it either." They went together to find Sergeant Han. Was the head of ship security, a woman of 36 with sharp features and sharper instincts. She had been a soldier before joining the Exploration Corps. She had seen war, loss, and things that left scars on her soul. She was hard and distant, rarely smiling, never sharing personal stories. But had heard rumors. She knew that had lost her younger brother during a colony raid years ago. She knew that somewhere beneath that armor, there was still a heart that remembered what it meant to lose someone you loved. They played the signal for, they watched her face. For a long moment, nothing happened. The expression remained stone. Then slowly something cracked. Her jaw tightened. Her hands curled into fists. Her eyes, usually so cold, became wet. "How old?" asked her voice rough. "We do not know exactly," said, "but young, very young." Closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the soldier was back, but now the soldier had a mission. "Tell me what you need," she said, and smiled for the first time in days. The plan was dangerous. The plan was against every rule, but some things were more important than rules. And met in secret in the lower cargo bay, where the security cameras had blind spots and the noise from the engines covered their voices. They sat between crates of supplies and spoke in whispers, like criminals planning a crime. In a way, they were. "We cannot change the ship's course without the captain knowing," said. "The navigation system logs everything. The moment we turn, he will see it." "But we can delay his discovery," replied. She had thought about this all night. "If we file a false report about navigation calibration problems, we can buy time. Standard procedure requires the helmsman to make small course corrections during calibration. No one questions small corrections." "How much time?" asked. "Maybe 12 hours, enough to get halfway there. By then, it will make more sense to continue than to turn back." Shook her head slowly. "You understand what happens if this fails: court-martial, prison, the end of our careers." "I understand." His voice was steady. "I also understand what happens if we do nothing. A child dies alone on a dying planet, and we lived the rest of our lives knowing we could have saved her. The cargo bay was quiet except for the hum of the engines, looked at his hands, stared at the floor. The weight of the decision pressed down on all of them. Finally spoke, "My job is to save lives. That is why I became a doctor. If I turn away from this, I am not a doctor anymore. I am just someone who wears a white coat." Took longer. Her face was a battlefield of emotions she rarely showed. When she spoke, her voice was rough. 15 years ago, my brother called me. He was scared. Raiders were attacking his colony. He asked me to come. He asked me to save him. She paused. I was too far away. By the time help arrived, he was gone. She looked up at, "I will not be too far away again." The conspiracy of 3 became reality. That night filed the false calibration report. Oh, the young helmsman was on duty. He was only 25, fresh from the academy, eager to prove himself. When approached him with technical jargon about navigation drift and sensor, he believed her without question. She felt guilty for using his trust, but she pushed the guilt aside. There would be time for apologies later. The turn slowly, degree by degree, heading toward the dying planet. For 10 hours, the plan worked perfectly. The crew went about their normal duties. Captain reviewed reports in his office, unaware that his ship was sailing toward forbidden waters. Monitored the signal from her station, listening to the child's voice grow slightly stronger as they drew closer. She wondered about the girl out there. What did she look like? What had happened to her people? How long had she been waiting, hopping, praying that someone would hear? The signal never stopped. "Save me, please, anyone, save me," over and over like a prayer that refused to die. On the 11th hour, everything fell apart. Captain was a careful man. He had survived 30 years in space by noticing things that others missed. When he reviewed the morning navigation report, something felt wrong. The numbers were correct, but they were too correct, too neat, like someone had made them pretty on purpose. He went to the bridge and checked the actual star positions against their logged course. The truth became clear in seconds. His voice over the ship's intercom was ice. "Lieutenant Park, Dr. Lee, Sergeant Han, report to the bridge immediately." The confrontation that followed would become legend among the crew. Stood at the center of the bridge facing Captain, stood on her left, on her right. The other crew members watched from their stations, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe. "You changed my ship's course," Captain said. His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. "You lied to your commanding officer. You endangered this mission and this crew." "Yes, sir," said. She did not apologize, she did not explain, she simply agreed. "Why?" "You know why, sir." Captain's jaw tightened. "That signal is not worth our lives. It is not worth our careers. It is probably nothing but an echo from a dead world." "And if it is not nothing," stepped forward, her voice rising, "Captain, I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to listen." Before he could respond, she pulled out her personal device and connected it to the bridge speakers. The child's voice filled the room. "Save me, please, anyone, save me." The bridge fell silent. Crew members who had been angry moments before now looked uncertain. Helmsman stared at his hands. Engineer, a quiet woman of 40, wiped her eyes. Even the tough engineer, who never showed emotion, looked away. The voice continued, trembling, desperate, alone. 42 days, said quietly. She has been calling for help for 42 days. Her planet is dying. Her people are dead. She is a child, Captain. A child who built a transmitter from nothing and screamed into the void, hoping that someone somewhere would care enough to answer. She looked directly into his eyes. "I am asking you, sir, not as my captain, as a human being, can you truly walk away from that voice?" The silence stretched. Seconds became eternities. Captain's face was unreadable. He had built walls around his heart years ago, after losing crew members to bad decisions and worse luck. He had learned that emotions were dangerous in space, that caring too much could get people killed. But the voice would not stop. It played on, filling the bridge with its desperate hope. Finally, Captain raised his hand, stopped the recording. "How far to the planet?" he asked. 14 hours at current speed, answered quickly. "We can increase to maximum thrust and arrive in 10. And the planet's condition?" "Unstable," reported from her engineering station. "Seismic activity increasing, radiation levels rising. I estimate complete collapse within 72 hours, maybe less." Captain closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. The ice in his gaze had melted slightly. 3 hours, he said finally. "We go to that planet, we search for the source of that signal, and we leave in 3 hours. No more, no arguments, no exceptions." Felt her heart leap. "Yes, sir." "And Lieutenant Park's voice hardened again. "When we return, you and I will discuss your actions in detail. There will be consequences." "I understand, sir." "I do not think you do." He turned away from her. "But that is a problem for later. Maximum thrust, get us there." The surged forward, engines burning bright against the darkness. Returned to her station, her hands shaking with relief and fear. Touched her shoulder as he passed, gave her a small nod. The conspiracy of 3 had become something more. A mission, a purpose. They would reach the dying planet. They would find the child. They would bring her home. But as watched the stars streak past the windows, she could not shake a feeling of dread. 3 hours was not much time, and the universe rarely gave second chances to those who its rules. The signal continued to play in her earpiece, softer now, private. "Save me, please, anyone." "We are coming," whispered. "Hold on, we are coming." Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a rust-colored planet waited. A dying world with a single living heartbeat still flickering in its ruins. A child who had been alone for 42 days, watching her world fall apart, refusing to stop hopping. The flew toward her at maximum speed. And time began to run out. The planet looked like it was bleeding. From orbit, could see great cracks spreading across its surface, glowing orange with heat from below. Dust storms swirled over dead cities. Mountains crumbled into valleys that had once been seas. This world was dying, and it was not dying quietly. "Radiation levels are high but manageable," reported from her station. "Our suits will protect us for approximately 4 hours. After that, exposure becomes dangerous." "Then we move fast," said. She was already checking her weapon, a habit from her soldier days. "Landing team is ready." The team consisted of 5 people, would lead them to the signal source, would handle any medical emergencies, would provide security, and the ship's engineers would manage technical problems and help carry equipment. Captain watched them board the shuttle from the bridge. His face showed nothing, but his eyes followed with something that might have been concern. 3 hours, he reminded them over the communicator, not a minute more. "Understood, sir," replied. The shuttle descended through clouds of ash and smoke. The ride was rough, shaking them hard as winds battered the small ship, fought with the controls while called out readings. Through the windows, they could see the ruins below growing larger. There had been a beautiful civilization. Their cities were built from crystals that caught light and turned it into rainbows. Their towers spiraled toward the sky like flowers reaching for the sun. Their art covered every surface, telling stories of a people who loved beauty, knowledge, and peace. Now it was all broken. The crystals were shattered. The towers had fallen. The art was buried under rubble and dust. Whatever had killed them completely. "What happened here?" asked quietly, staring at the destruction. "Plague," answered, reading her scanner. "Biological contamination everywhere. Some kind of disease swept through the population. Fast, deadly. I am not detecting the pathogen anymore. It must have died when its hosts died." "Or when there was no one left to infect," said grimly. The shuttle landed in what had once been a central plaza. The team stepped out into a world of silence and dust. Their boots crunched on broken crystal. The wind howled through empty streets, carrying the smell of decay and ash. Activated her tracking device. The signal was stronger now, pulling her northeast toward a collapsed structure near the plaza's edge. She started walking, and the others followed. They passed bodies along the way. They had been humanoid but different, taller than humans, 4 arms instead of 2, skin that might have glowed with soft light when alive but was now dull and gray. Large eyes stared at nothing, frozen in expressions of fear and pain. They died running, observed. Her voice was professional, controlled, but could see the tension in her shoulders. Something scared them. The plague, suggested. No, shook her head. People who die from sickness do not look like this. They were afraid of something else, something that came with the plague or after it. They did not have time to investigate further. The ground shook beneath them, a reminder that this planet would not wait, pushed forward following the signal. The collapsed structure had once been a home, could tell by the personal items scattered among the ruins. Toys, clothes, pictures drawn by a child's hand. A family had lived here, laughed here, loved here. Now they were gone. The signal is coming from below, said, checking her device. There must be a basement or shelter. And began moving rubble while stood guard. Helped where he could. The work was hard and slow, but eventually they uncovered a hatch hidden beneath broken stone. The hatch was sealed, but a faint blue glow showed that power still flowed to whatever lay beneath. Worked on the lock while the others waited. After several tense minutes, the hatch hissed open. Below them was a small shelter, barely large enough for 2 adults. Emergency lights flickered on the walls. An old energy shield hummed weakly, its power almost gone. And huddled in the corner, clutching a device made from scraps and broken parts, was a child. She screamed when she saw them. The sound was high and sharp, filled with pure terror. She scrambled backward, pressing against the wall, her 4 arms covering her face. Her skin flashed with colors, probably an instinctive reaction to fear. Predators, the translator in ear caught the word. More predators, no, no, no. Held up her hands and dropped to her knees, making herself small. We are not predators, she said slowly, knowing the translator would convert her words. We heard your signal. We came to help. The child did not believe her. She continued to scream, to cry, to beg for mercy. Whatever had happened to she had seen things that no child should see. Her trust was broken completely. Moved slowly forward, his voice gentle. My name is, I am a doctor. I help people who are hurt. Are you hurt? The screaming continued, but softer now. The child's large violet eyes peeked out from behind her arms, watching with terrified curiosity. You have been alone for a long time, continued. You must be scared, you must be hungry. We brought food, we brought medicine. We want to take you somewhere safe. No safe, the child whispered. The translator struggled with her broken speech. No safe anywhere, everyone dead. Monsters came, monsters ate, I hide, I call, no one come. We came, said softly. We heard you and we came. The child stared at her. Minutes passed. The ground shook again, harder this time. Dust fell from the ceiling of the shelter. Time was running out. Finally, slowly, the child lowered her arms. Her skin stopped flashing. Her breathing calmed slightly. You came, she repeated like she was testing the words. You heard, you came. Yes, reached out her hand. What is your name? The child looked its hand for a long moment. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached out and touched it. Lyra, she said. My name is Lyra. Hello, Lyra, my name is. We are going to take you home. Lyra was 7 cycles old, which meant something like 7 years in human terms. She was small for her age, weak from hunger and dehydration. Her skin should have glowed soft blue, but malnutrition had dimmed it to pale gray. She had spent 42 days in this shelter, living on emergency rations that had run out a week ago, drinking recycled water and calling into the void. Her parents had hidden her here when the monsters came. They had promised to return. They never did. Examined her quickly, his scanner revealing the truth of her suffering. Dehydration, malnutrition, early signs of radiation exposure. She needed proper medical care soon, or she would not survive much longer. "We need to move," said, watching her own scanner. "Seismic activity is increasing. We have maybe 40 minutes before this whole area becomes unstable." Nodded and turned to Lyra. "Can you walk?" Lyra tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Her legs were too weak. She looked up with shame in her eyes, like she had failed somehow. Stepped forward without hesitation. She knelt down and turned her back to Lyra. "Climb on," she said. "I will carry you." Lyra hesitated. She did not know this hard-faced woman. She did not trust easily anymore. "Is strong," explained. "She will keep you safe, I promise." Slowly, carefully, Lyra climbed onto his back. Her forearms wrapped around shoulders and neck. She weighed almost nothing. Stood up easily, adjusting her grip to support the child. For a moment her hard expression softened. She looked almost gentle. "Hold tight," she said. "We are going home." The team began the journey back to the shuttle. Behind them, the shelter collapsed into the growing crack in the earth. The world continued to die around them. But they had found what they came for. Now they just had to escape. The ground split open 50 meters ahead of them. One moment they were running through the ruined streets, the shuttle visible in the distance. The next moment, a crack tore through the earth with a sound like thunder, and fire erupted from below. Lyra screamed and buried her face in shoulder. "Go around," shouted, pointing to an alley on their left. "There is another path." They turned and ran. The air grew hotter. The sky grew darker. Ash fell like black snow, covering everything in gray. Behind them, buildings collapsed into the growing void. The planet was tearing itself apart, and it did not care who was caught in the destruction. Led the way, her scanner showing a route through the chaos. Stayed close behind, ready to help if anyone fell. Ran beside, both engineers carrying heavy equipment that might be needed to fix the shuttle. Moved with surprising speed despite carrying Lyra on her back. "How much time?" asked between breaths. Checked her device. "Shuttle is 300 meters ahead. We have maybe 20 minutes before the seismic activity reaches critical level." "That is not enough time." "Then we make it enough." They emerged from the alley into another plaza, this one larger and more open. The shuttle sat on the far side, looking small and fragile against the apocalyptic landscape. They were so close now, so close to safety. Then the tower fell. Did not see it coming. None of them did. One moment the ancient crystal spire stood against the dark sky. The next moment it was falling, crashing down toward the plaza in an avalanche of glass and stone. "Move!" screamed. Everyone scattered, dove behind a broken wall, pulled into a doorway, was not fast enough. The falling debris caught her across the back, throwing her to the ground. She cried out in pain as sharp crystal cut through her suit and into her flesh. More rubble crashed down around her, pinning her leg beneath a heavy stone. A screamed. Was already moving. She set Lyra down gently against a wall. "Stay here, do not move." Then she ran toward the fallen engineer. The debris was still settling. More pieces fell from above, ignored the danger completely. She reached and began lifting the stone that trapped her leg, her face twisted with effort. The stone was heavy, too heavy for one person. Arrived seconds later and added her strength. Together, they lifted the stone enough for to pull free. "Her arm is broken," reported, his scanner running over her injuries. "Deep cuts on her back, she is losing blood." "Can she walk?" asked. "Not well, not fast." Stepped forward. "I will help her, you carry the child, go." Hesitated for only a second. Then she nodded and ran back to Lyra, who was exactly where she had been left, watching everything with wide, terrified eyes. "I am sorry," Lyra whispered as picked her up. I am trouble, I am always trouble. You are not trouble, his voice was firm. You are why we are here, now hold on tight. They moved again, slower now. Supported, who limped badly but refused to cry, ran beside them ready to catch if she fell, stayed ahead, finding the safest path through the destruction. The shuttle was so close, 100 meters, 80, 60. The ground shook again, and this time it did not stop. A constant tremor ran through the earth, growing stronger with each second. Cracks spread across the plaza like spider webs. Buildings groaned and swayed. The shuttle shouted, "Look at the shuttle." Looked and felt her heart drop. A piece of the fallen tower had struck their shuttle. One of the wings was damaged, bent at an angle that should not exist. Smoke rose from the engine compartment. "Can we still fly?" asked, running to examine the damage. Lowered to the ground and joined her. Her hands moved quickly over the damaged wing, assessing the situation. Maybe. The main engine is intact, but the stabilizers are destroyed. Flying will be rough, very rough. Can we reach the... Paused. If we go now, if nothing else breaks, if the pilot is very, very good. Is our pilot? They both looked at, who sat against the shuttle with her broken arm cradled against her chest and blood soaking through her suit. She looked back at them with determination in her eyes. "Get me to the controls," she said. "I can fly." They carried her into the shuttle and strapped her into the pilot's seat. Worked quickly, injecting painkillers and applying emergency bandages. It was not proper treatment, but it would keep her functional long enough to reach the ship. Brought Lyra aboard and secured her in a passenger seat. The child was shaking, her skin flashing with colors of fear. Knelt beside her. "You are safe now," she said softly. "We are leaving this place." "The monsters," Lyra whispered. "The monsters will follow." "There are no monsters here, only us, and we will protect you." Lyra looked at for a long moment. Then she reached out with one of her small hands and touched face. "You are kind," she said. "Your eyes are sad, but you are kind." Something broke in its expression. For a second, she was not a soldier anymore. She was just a woman who had lost someone she loved and had finally found a chance to make it right. "Hold on," she said, her voice thick. "We are going home." The shuttle lifted off with a scream of damaged engines. The flight was terrible, exactly as had predicted. They bounced and swayed through the turbulent atmosphere, thrown against their straps with every gust of wind. Fought the controls with her one good hand, her face pale with pain but her focus absolute. Below them, the planet continued to die. Whole cities vanished into cracks of fire. Mountains collapsed. The oceans boiled away. Everything that had built over thousands of years disappeared in minutes. Lyra watched through the window, tears streaming down her face. She did not make a sound. She had no tears left for crying out loud. "This is Shuttle One," called into the communicator. "We have the child. We are coming home, but our shuttle is damaged. We need help." Captain's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Shuttle One. We see your trajectory. You are too low. You cannot reach orbit with that damage." "Then what do we do?" There was a pause. When spoke again, his voice was different. The cold professionalism was gone. In its place was something human. "We come to you. Hold your altitude. We are descending into the upper atmosphere." "Sir, that will put enormous stress on the hull." "I am aware." Another pause. "Just hold on, Lieutenant. We are coming." The dropped from orbit like a stone. It was not designed for atmospheric flight. The heat shield screamed under the pressure. The hull groaned with stress that pushed it to its limits. On the bridge, Captain stood at his station, watching the numbers, making calculations, refusing to blink. "Hull temperature critical," reported, his voice shaking. "Maintain descent." "Sir, we could break apart." "Maintain descent, helmsman. That is an order." The shuttle rose as high as it could. The dropped as low as it dared. The two ships met in the fire zone between space and atmosphere, where the sky was red and the air burned. Docking was impossible. Jury-rigged a magnetic clamp that caught this emergency port. The connection was rough, imperfect, but it held. "Go," shouted. "Everyone out, the clamp will not last." They scrambled through the connection, crawling through the narrow emergency tube into this airlock, carried Lyra, helped, and came last, pulling themselves through just as the shuttle tore away and fell back toward the dying world. The airlock sealed behind them. The engines roared to full power. The ship climbed desperately, fighting gravity, fighting heat, fighting everything that wanted to pull it down. They escaped with seconds to spare. From the observation deck, the crew of the watched the planet finally die. It collapsed inward like a deflating balloon, then exploded outward in a burst of fire and rock. Where a world had existed, there was now only debris and dust. Lyra stood at the window, her four hands pressed against the glass. She watched her home, her history, her entire people disappear forever. No more cities, no more art, no more songs or stories or dreams. She was the last, she was alone. Came to stand beside her. She did not speak. She did not try to comfort with words. She simply stood there present, sharing the weight of loss. After a long time, Lyra spoke. Her voice was small, broken, but steady. "You came," she said. "No one ever comes, but you came." "Yes," said softly, "we came." Lyra turned to look at her. Her violet eyes were filled with pain and confusion and something else, something like hope. "Why?" Thought about the question. She thought about rules and missions and all the reasons they should have turned away. Then she thought about a voice crying in the darkness, asking only to be heard. "Because you called," she said finally, "and we heard you." Lyra stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. They stood together at the window, watching the stars return as they sailed away from the destruction. A woman and a child, two species, one moment of connection. Behind them the crew was quiet. Even Captain said nothing. Some moments were too important for words. The long journey home had begun. 2 years passed, the universe changed. The story of Lyra spread across every planet in the Federation. News channels played the recording of her distress signal over and over. People watched and listened and wept. A child's voice crying for help. A human ship that answered. Humans had always been strange to the other species. They were young. They were loud. They were emotional in ways that older civilizations found uncomfortable. They made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They took risks that made no sense. But now there was a new word whispered about them in the halls of galactic power. Compassionate. Humans were compassionate. They heard a child screaming in the darkness, and they could not walk away. Some species thought this was weakness. Others called it dangerous sentimentality. But a few, a small and growing few, began to wonder if perhaps they had been wrong. Perhaps there was strength in caring. Perhaps there was power in compassion. The Federation Council called a special session to discuss the incident. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the Great Hall on Earth, a building made of glass and light that looked out over the Pacific Ocean. They came to judge. They came to question. They came to understand. And Lyra came to speak. She walked into the chamber with her head held high. She was 9 years old now, no longer the starving, terrified child they had pulled from the ruins. Her skin glowed soft blue, healthy and bright. She wore clothes in the human style but decorated with patterns that she had learned from old recordings. She was the last of her kind, but she carried her people with her. Beside her walked, now her legal mother under Earth law. Behind them came Shin's partner, who had become Lyra's second mother. The family of 3 approached the speaker's platform together. The chamber fell silent. 1,000 eyes watched. 1,000 translators hummed, ready to convert whatever was said into languages from across the galaxy. Lyra stepped up to the platform. She looked out at the gathered representatives, these powerful beings who controlled the fate of civilizations. She was small before them. She was young. She was alone. But she was not afraid, not anymore. 2 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady, I was a child on a dying world. My people were gone. My parents were dead. Everything I knew and loved had been destroyed. I had nothing left except a broken transmitter and a voice that was growing tired of screaming. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I called for help for 42 days. I called in every direction, on every frequency I could find. I begged. I pleaded. I prayed to gods I did not believe in. No one answered. Her eyes moved across the chamber, meeting the gazes of species she had never seen before, would never fully understand. I learned something during those 42 days. I learned that the universe is very large and very cold. I learned that most people have reasons for looking away. They have rules. They have schedules. They have important things to do. A child crying on a dying planet is not their problem. Why should they risk anything for a stranger? She took a breath. Then the humans came. A murmur ran through the chamber. Lyra waited for it to fade. They heard my signal. One woman working alone in the middle of the night caught my voice in the static. She could have ignored it. Her captain told her to ignore it, but she did not. She could not, because that is what humans are. They hear someone crying for help and something inside them breaks until they answer. She turned to look at, who stood with tears in her eyes. They changed their course. They broke their rules. They risked their ship, their careers, their lives, not because I could offer them anything, not because saving me made logical sense, but because I was a child and I was alone and I was afraid. That was enough. For humans, that was everything. Lyra faced the council again. My people are gone. I am the last. I will never hear another voice. I will never see another face. When I die, my species dies with me. This is a truth I carry every day, and it is heavy, so heavy that sometimes I cannot breathe. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. But I am not alone, because when I screamed into the darkness, humans answered. They did not ask what I could give them. They did not calculate the cost. They simply came. And when they found me, they did not leave me behind. They carried me. They healed me. They gave me a home. She smiled, a small and fragile thing, but real. They gave me a family. Lyra straightened her shoulders. Her voice grew stronger. I stand before you today not to praise humanity or blame others. I stand here to ask a question. What kind of galaxy do we want to live in? Do we want a galaxy where children cry for help and no one comes? Do we want a galaxy where we measure the worth of a life against the cost of saving it? She shook her head. I do not want that galaxy. I want a galaxy where every voice matters, where every cry is heard, where we look at a stranger in pain and see ourselves. The humans taught me that this galaxy is possible. They proved it with their actions. Her final words rang through the chamber. My people had a saying. They said that the universe is dark, but the darkness is not empty. It is filled with voices, calling to each other, reaching across the void. We just have to choose to listen. She stepped back from the platform. The chamber was silent. Then slowly one representative began to applaud, then another, then 100. The sound grew until it shook the glass walls of the great hall. Captain sat in the observation gallery, watching. He had been called to testify earlier, had answered questions about his decisions, his doubts, his eventual choice to help. Now he watched the child he had almost left behind receive the gratitude of 100 worlds. Beside him sat and the crew that had risked everything. They had all received medals, commendations, honors that would follow them for the rest of their careers. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, watching Lyra speak, watching the universe change. We did the right thing, said quietly. Nodded slowly, yes, we did. That day, the Federation passed new laws. Distress signals from unknown sources would no longer be automatically classified as low priority. Resources would be allocated for rapid response. The Lyra Protocol became the official standard for first contact with civilizations in crisis. Humanity's reputation shifted. They were still seen as young and emotional and sometimes foolish, but now they were also seen as brave, compassionate, worthy of respect. Years passed. Lyra grew up in a house by the sea in Korea, raised by two mothers who loved her completely. She learned Korean and English and kept studying so she would never forget. She laughed at human jokes she did not quite understand. She made friends with human children who thought her four arms were amazing. Sometimes she still woke from nightmares, dreams of silence and darkness and a voice that no one heard, but was always there, was always there. They held her until the fear faded. She studied hard. She went to university. She became dedicated to preserving what remained of culture and knowledge. She wrote books. She gave lectures. She became an ambassador between species, using her story to build bridges. And one night, 20 years after her rescue, Ambassador Lyra sat alone in her office, reviewing reports from deep space exploration vessels. She was tired. She was getting older. The weight of being the last never fully left her shoulders. Then she saw it, a flag on a routine communication scan, an anomaly buried in background radiation, a pattern that any normal filter would delete. Her heart began to beat faster. She isolated the signal and cleaned it. Layer by layer, the noise fell away. And there, emerging from the static like a ghost, was a voice. Young, trembling, desperate. "Is anyone there? Please, my world is dying, please help, is anyone there?" Lyra stared at the screen. Tears rolled down her face. The universe was large and cold and full of darkness. But it was also full of voices. She opened a channel, she took a breath, and she spoke the words that had once saved her life. "I hear you, help is coming, hold on, you are not alone." Somewhere in the endless dark, a child heard her. And for the first time in a very long time, Lyra smiled. The cycle continued. The voices echoed across the void, and humanity's greatest lesson lived on. When someone cries for help, you answer. Always. You answer.